every piece of content that you put out in the world allows people not only to discover your business, but to develop a trust factor with you and understand how you can best serve them, which leads to more profit inside of your business. So the more content that you put out in the world, the more chances you have to meet the right audience so that you can make more profit inside of your businesses. But we also want to make sure that we're not overwhelming you and stressing you out as you're making content creation. So we want to make sure that we're advocating and teaching you here how to spend less time creating more valuable, more profitable content so you can be present on social media but spend less time doing it so you can give back to running your business and living your best life. Today's guest is all about creating more content that's going to be more valuable for you in a much easier way. So let's jump into our conversation with Matt McWilliams.
Hey guys, I'm Matt McWilliams, author of Turn Your Passions into Profits. And I'm so excited today to be sharing how to create consistent content that converts.
And I'm incredibly excited that you were here because one of the things that I talk about a lot on my platform is creating as much content as possible and making sure you're creating it consistently and making sure you're getting those conversions. So tell me, in your own words, why is it so important to create as much content as possible?
I mean, content's the lifeblood of our business. I know this for a fact. Like, there was a time, now this is not true in my business today. Today we are very consistent. We release a new episode on Tuesdays. We release a blog post on Thursdays, and then we do another piece of content on Monday that we called Wildcard Mondays. It should have been Wildcard Wednesday, but we don't want to do 3 straight days. That varies. We do have a little bit of inconsistency there because it depends on what's going on. But we're very consistent. Like, we will release in the next 365 days, we'll release more than 500 hours as far as reading time, plus audio, plus video of free content. That's the lifeblood of our business. But I remember a time, KM, when I would maybe not be as consistent. So now we have consistent sales coming in, but maybe I'd go like a week without producing content. And guess what would happen to our sales? They'd go and then flatline.
Yeah.
We might bring in some stuff from like SEO and things, but that was about it.
Sure.
Then I would release content and sales would go up.
Right.
Like, well, duh, and we're not even selling in the content. It's just awareness, right? We're keeping in front of not only my audience, but we're attracting, new people. It's just like how many shares I get when I don't share my content? I get 0.
Right.
And when I do share, I get hundreds. Well, that's because I put my stuff out there in front of people, and so it's the lifeblood of our business. We know the term content marketing, right? I just want to provide value. I want to keep my name out there. There's a, I won't get into the whole story, but there's a reason why my podcast, for example, is called the Affiliate Guy Podcast. It's because for years, for over a decade, people kept saying, Matt, you need to teach this stuff. You need to teach this stuff. And I'd say, I don't want to be the affiliate guy.
Right.
So I picked the name, the Affiliate Guy, as a reminder of 2 things. Number one, always listen to my wife, because she was one of the people who kept saying, you need to teach this stuff. You need to teach this stuff. I'm like, I don't want to be the affiliate guy. And number 2, like, lean into the thing you're already known for. Don't be an idiot, So those are 2 reasons. I named it for that. You know what people say when they introduce me now? Every email, like, you got to talk to Matt. He's the affiliate guy. I never thought about it from a branding perspective. I wish I'd been that smart. I named it actually as a selfish reason to remind myself not to be a doofus. And so that's the power of that content, because they're like, and I talk to people who are clients now. And I'll say, blah, blah, blah. I'll tell them a story like, oh yeah, I remember you talking about that on the podcast 2 years ago. And I'm like, dang, really? Like, you remember that? Yeah. I mean, that's the power of content is it's the closeness, the intimacy that I have with my audience is, I got to be honest, like, it's mind blowing to me. I can't quite wrap my head around it sometimes, because I'm like, really? Because I shared that on a podcast? Like, they feel like they know me that well. They know all this stuff. They know about my kids. Like, there are people who like, I get text. So on my text platform, like, right, where I invite my audience to text me anytime, and they will text me and say, how was your daughter's soccer tournament? I'm like, how did you even know?
Yeah.
And they're like, because you said it in the podcast this week. I'm like, I did? I talked about that because it was in the context of, hey, listen, I'm busy and I don't have time to do all this. And ironically, that one is actually the one where I shared what I'm going to share with you about, creating content. And I was like, that's right. I shared because we had a soccer tournament and boom, boom, boom. And I only had like 2 hours, but I wanted to create 3 hours of content. So how do you do that? And, and I was talking about that and they're like, they asked, how was my daughter's side? Like that level of intimacy, you can't pay for that.
Yeah.
Content.
And I've learned in my own business, the more I talk, the more content I put out there, the more people adhere themselves to me and really learn who I am and what I'm doing inside of my life and my business. And that just blossoms into this really great community. So the more I put out, the more community I have and the more money that I'm making. And I know you've got a really good framework for making sure that you have consistent content, because we're all about saving time and effort when it comes to creating content so we can get daily, weekly, monthly content out there to represent our business. So what is this framework of yours?
Yeah. So I call it the ICE framework. It's again, I know we did another episode and I talked about how I love acronyms because it helps me remember things, but it also helps me with my team to be like, here's our framework. Let's create this, So the I in ICE is just the idea, right? This is what are like concepts, what could potential content be? And we'll talk about these more a little bit in depth. The C is actually the creation. So this is like, I'm going to write the blog post. I'm going to record the podcast episode. I'm going to shoot the video. I'm going to make the slides for the webinar. And then the E, this is the most important, is the engagement. And I will tell you where people get most of this wrong, and we can talk more about this, is they spend 60% on the I, or no, they spend 30% on the I, 60% on the C, the creation. I spent 12 hours writing that blog post. And then they spend 10% on the engagement. Remember the old saying, if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? If your content is the most amazing thing in the world, here's an idea. Name somebody who won a Pulitzer Prize. Or what's the prize for like best book? It's not, is it a Pulitzer? I don't know. I know there's like,
yes. That's one of them.
Yeah. Name the Pulitzer Prize winners in the last few years. Nobody knows. Name the Newbery Award winners for best written. Nobody knows the best written books. What do we know? Best selling books.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I'm not going to call out the book. There's a book that has been the best seller. I get a list from my publisher every single week of the best. It blows me away the number of books this book is selling. I've read it. It is not very good. It has been a #1 best-selling book for almost a year straight every single week. Why? Marketing is amazing.
Yeah.
So if he spent 500 times more time promoting the book than he did writing it. I know that I know it's roughly probably that's pretty accurate assessment.
Yeah.
What if it'd been the other way around? Be a little bit better book and nobody would be reading it. Well, what would he do? So that's the framework though. Idea, creation, and engagement.
And engagement really is important to make sure that we are marketing it, because if we create the best thing ever, but nobody knows about it, it's not going to do us any good. So as we are jumping into talking about how we can be easily creating this content, what are your best tips for us to make sure that we're really creating content that's going to resonate with our audience?
It kind of depends on where you're at. If you're struggling for ideas, like, man, we've reached the point where we get enough questions that I could just answer questions for the next 15 years and I would never have run out of content. That wasn't the way it was when I first started. Nobody was asking questions because they didn't have any questions to ask. I didn't have anybody following me.
Right.
So at first I had to think, okay, what are some of those ideas? How do I come up with more ideas? And so what I did was I got very intentional about it. First I started consuming a lot of content, but I write about this in the book. I think it says start consuming more content, but not how you think.
Yep. Which is my favorite section. And I want to talk about it.
Okay, cool. For me, that just means start exposing yourself to more content in general. This can be content that is it's not like there's I'm listening to a couple of books right now. I'm listening to a book right now called CEO Excellence. I am not listening to that to communicate to my audience. I'm going to learn nothing in that book that I'm going to relay to my audience, because my audience mostly is not CEOs. Right? I'm learning how to be a better leader for my company. But I'm also listening to a couple of books that are more beginner. I am learning nothing, but it's triggering oh, this is what people are thinking. Oh, that's it. Oh, you know what? I could communicate that to my audience and that to my audience and that to my audience. Yeah. Consuming, I don't recommend consuming news just because I think it's toxic, but could you at least sort of keep up with a little bit of the headlines with some filters? I use Feedly to be able to keep up. There's a couple of newspapers that I'll engage with, and I just read the headline. So at least I can come, oh, there's something going on in the world. Like, oh, I don't know, like a pandemic starting. Maybe I want to do some content around that, like that was something I needed to be aware of. Think about like ideas, like how can we consume content and then apply it? A lot of my content, if you go back and look, I've done podcast episodes about Thomas Jefferson and affiliate marketing. I did one, I do a lot of historical quotes. I quote a lot of people from history, and I tie, like I did one on Thomas Jefferson. I did one on FDR. I did one on Ronald Reagan, like all political parties, just to be clear, I've done stuff on Confucius, like this whole lesson. I was listening to this podcast one day about Confucius, and it was talking about how this guy, and I do see him passing, but he said the Zhou dynasty started to collapse in like 596 BC. I was like, oh, okay, whatever. So it probably fell apart by like 594 BC. And he was like, and then it finally fell apart in like 246 BC. And I may be wrong on those dates, but it was like 350 years. This is 2,500 years ago that it took for that government to collapse. And I was like, oh my gosh, think about it today. Like we watch governments collapse live on social media. They are live streaming the overthrow of a government on Twitter. It happened in 7 hours. Right. Even when we were kids, like when I was a kid, the Soviet Union, it was like Berlin Wall there, Berlin Wall not there. Soviet Union, our greatest enemy, hide under your desk, put your hands over your head. Oh, wait, there's no more Soviet Union. It happened in a flash. And I'm thinking, oh, we need to move fast in business. Our business has to move fast. And I'm like, I can't make that connection without that story from this random biography of Confucius. So just consuming more content is the first thing. Again, this is assuming that you don't have the ability to just get a bunch of questions. The other thing you got to have, I carry one of these around, and I mentioned to you before we went live that we had a flood here recently. I had a bunch of these destroyed. Thankfully, they were all my old ones that I digitized. But you can see in there, I didn't have this handy with me, so I wrote it on. I grabbed somebody's legal paper and wrote it there. I've got this just fell out, but I've got these two. So I mean, these are just 3 that I have going right now. These are all content journals. Which reminds me, I need to move this one over here so I remember to digitize it. Because it's full. It's actually full. And so I keep one of those. Like, why this size? Because I can fit it right here. Right. Small enough. I used to have some that were smaller until I got these. I can even fit it in my hoodie thing here. There's no excuse not to have. Okay. Well, what about your notes thing? Oh, can you use the digital? What is that thing called? The voice, memo recorder. Right. Capture the ideas when they're fresh. Here's the deal. I would be willing to bet in this one right here. This one is full. So there are 48 pages. I probably write about 1 per page, sometimes 2. So there's probably 50 ideas in there. Less than 20 of those will see the light of day because I will read one of them and go, like right here, I'm writing one about, journey, blah, blah, blah. Oh, that's a really stupid idea. I can guarantee you like half the ideas and there are more. I'm going to read them and just go, that is a dumb idea for a podcast episode. That's a terrible idea for a blog post. There's no way I'm ever going to do that. Right. It's just a really bad idea, but I wrote it in there. And then sometimes I read it and I go, wait a minute. And then I'm like, what was that thing I wrote over in this one? Over here. Yeah, that one. Okay. Oh, you know what? That actually forms a coherent thought. Yeah. But if I don't capture it live, I'll never have it. So those are probably 2 of my favorite ones. There's so many more as you can curate people's content. Like things like, again, I mentioned, I don't trend jack, myself too much because I genuinely, I have no idea. Like I just found out there was a hurricane. It was like 8 days ago. I had no idea. I don't watch the news, so I have no idea. But, I do keep up with just enough sometimes where I can do that. And if you're in an industry where that works more, then you need to do it. Like if my profession depended upon watching the news, I'd watch the news, but now it doesn't, so I don't have to. But those are just some ideas. You can comment on that. Just story tell. We have a format to our emails. I was just reading one of the emails that our copywriter wrote, and it's like, we tell a story, then we talk about how that applies to the reader. And here's how you do that. Like people ask, how do you make that transition? How do you say, here's how that applies to you. And then you share the lesson. So the lesson is this from the story. And here's how it applies to you. And then you have a call to action, and you just follow that format. In the creation phase, that's kind of the format, just so you get the idea. The creation phase, the biggest thing, and we've all heard of this, but very few people practice it, batching.
I love batch
batching your
creation.
content. Like,
Yep.
oh my gosh, you can't. I'm gonna record. I try to record one podcast episode today. It just doesn't work.
Right.
Got to batch. You've just got to batch. For one, here's the deal. I cannot tell you how many times before I started batching, I'd be like, hey, I remember talking about that in some podcast episode at some point before, and I don't even remember which one it is. No, and now when I batch, I'm like, hey, I remember how I talked about this 2 podcast episodes ago. Here was the title. Go listen to it. You know?
Yeah.
So the batching, and then the engagement phase, like we talked about. This is the most important phase. 60, 70, 80, 90% of your time. When you're starting off, it's fine if it's only 60, because you might spend a little bit more time coming up with ideas and a little bit more time creating. Once you get into a rhythm with the idea creation and the idea and the creation side, I mean, it's probably less than 5% of my time now. You know, I spend all my time getting eyeballs on the content, sharing it on social, emailing about it, getting other people to email about it. You know, forming one of the best things I ever did was I formed what we call a sharing circle. And I talk about this in depth in the book, but like this sharing circle is just basically a group of people who agree to share each other's content.
Right.
So when I release a blog post, I know that we had about 20 people. I know that roughly 5 of them are going to share any given piece of content. Not the same 5, but they're going to rotate through. And at least once every 2 weeks, they're going to share something of mine. I release 4 pieces of content in 2 weeks typically. They're going to share something. And then fast forward the next 2 weeks, they're going to share. And I'm going to do the same thing with theirs. I'm not going to share every piece of content from every one of those people.
Right.
But I'm going to share some of their content. It's amazing what it can do just for getting eyeballs on your content. So you want to know how you form a sharing circle? Well, I talk about it in the book. No, I hate when people do that. Like, you literally reach out to one person who's at a similar level, half a level above or below you, and you say, here's what I'd like to do. Would you be willing to do it? Now you have 2 people. So then when you reach out to the third, it's infinitely easier. You might have to ask 5 people to get the first person.
Right.
You will only have to ask 2 people to get the second person. You will only have to ask about 25 people to get the next 18. Because people want to be a part of that group. Hey, there's 5 of us. Oh, great, I'll join. You know, the first one is the hardest. Second one is the second hardest, and so on and so forth. But you form that sharing circle. You start sharing each other's content, and then you're able to grow organically from there.
Absolutely. And these are fantastic points. I am a huge fan of everything that you've talked about, especially in that section of your book. I feel like you and I need to hang out quite a bit more because we're very similar.
Love to.
I love the idea of batch creation to make sure that we're creating a lot of content in a short amount of time. I love the idea of forming a circle around you of people who are going to be supportive and are going to help you grow while you're helping them grow. And I love the idea of creating as much content as possible, getting it out there, and getting as much engagement as you possibly can as you're creating this content to save you time and work and effort in the future. Inside of your book, you have so many good tips and tricks. And so I'm excited to invite you back on the show in the future. But until that point, we want to make sure people are getting their hands on your book. So where can everybody find you and learn more?
Yeah, go to passionsintoprofitsbook.com. So that's passions into profits. Don't leave off the S's, book.com. Grab the book. We got tons of pre-order bonuses as well. When you grab the book, here's the thing. Everything I just talked about, there's like in chapter step 10 there, which is create consistent content. There's probably about 40 times more than what I just shared. Don't skip to chapter 10 though. Go through the whole book. Start at step 1. You might get on step 1 and be like, Matt, I already know this stuff. That's cool. Are you actually practicing it? There's exercises at the end of each chapter. And I've had multiple people, guys. These are high level entrepreneurs. You have people who are running 7-figure online businesses that said, Matt, I read like the first 5 pages of step 1. I was like, I already know this stuff. This is so simple. I skipped to chapter 2, but across the page was the exercises. And I looked at the exercises and went, oh crap, I'm not doing any of that stuff. I know it. I know it, but I'm not doing it.
Exactly.
Get said, knowing is not enough. We must apply. There's no shortage of knowledge in the world. Most of us are so much smarter than our ancestors. It's frightening. True. I mentioned earlier, I know stuff about Confucius and the Eastern Zhou dynasty, but my mom doesn't even know how to pronounce that. She doesn't even know they're what. Who's Confucius is the guy who writes the fortune cookies, right?
There you go.
She didn't know that stuff. But knowing is not enough. We must apply. And so I've heard from those people I did the exercises. That one of them said, so at the end of chapter 2 is all about leadership. Commit to lead is step 2. And it's about leadership in the context of leading your tribe, leading your audience, right?
Yeah.
and how like it's the concept is of leadership is completely misconstrued. We think leadership means you have to be light years ahead of your audience and you have to be the expert. Now, leadership is being one step ahead. And I share this in the book, this example of like, there's this, imagine like you're on a hike with your best friend, and your best friend is one of those people who's like super fit. He always wears bike shorts to cookouts, and he's like jogs in place for no reason. He's just like, dude, we're just relaxing. Why are you jogging in place? Smells like soup mix all the time. We don't know why. Like, this guy's just one of those people, and he's 2 miles ahead of you yelling, and you're like, hurry up. And you're like, what? Hurry up. What?
Yeah.
He's like, hurry up. And then you fall in the pot, the hole, and you die. Right. That's not leadership. Leadership is when you're one step ahead, you can reach behind a person, grab their hand and say, hey, watch out. There's a hole right here.
Yeah.
That's what leadership is. You only have to be one step ahead. You can be on the journey with them. You're at step C when they're on step B. We think we have to be at step R. We don't. We just have to be one step ahead.
Right.
And so I heard this guy, he read the book, this guy who endorsed the book, I'm just going to say he's worth $250 million. All right. Okay. And he said at the end of step 2, there's a leadership commitment. And he said, Matt, I printed that out. There's a URL where you can print it out. He said, I printed it out. I filled it out. I signed it and dated it and framed it and put it up in my office. And he said, the craziest thing happened. He said, I committed to leading my tribe. And he said, I've been really struggling, because he does a daily, like you talk about content. This guy's doing stuff daily. He said, I've been really struggling. And he said, I made that commitment to lead my audience. He said, the ideas have been, he didn't even read step 10. He didn't even need to know all the how to create content stuff. He said, when I made the commitment to being a leader for my audience, content started flowing from me. This guy's worth $250 million. And he's filling out this form on step 2 that I created for Joe Blow average. It blew me away. Those are the kind of things you're gonna find inside the book. So just all I'm saying is, don't skip to step 10. I know you want to. How do I get more content? How do I get more eyeballs? How do I grow my audience? You got to go through step 1 first. That's all I'm saying with that. Yep. Long way of saying that.
Go through the process to get the results. And if you skip the steps, it's not going to be as effective. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I can't wait to have you back.
I look forward to it.